This program is brought to you by 3C TV. Like what you learned? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up on the latest 3C TV programs.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the California Community Colleges Student Success and Support Program Implementation Summit. To kick things off and welcome you this morning, I want to introduce Deputy Chancellor Eric Skinner.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you, Linda. Wow, this is wonderful. What a great room full of people. A lot of great energy. And I'd like to say good morning and welcome to the Student Success and Support Program Implementation Summit. And I think we've got a couple days, 2 days worth of very stimulating and productive activities lined up for you. And it's just wonderful to have all of you, have all this energy in the room. It's an exciting time for our system. And, I think the California community colleges are really poised for a significant step forward. In many ways, the student success agenda that we've been working on collectively, I think is really coming to a new level of maturity. And it's so exciting to have some resources coming back. The augmentation that was included in this year's budget to the Student Success and Support Program really provides an opportunity to build out some programs and to build some new models based on effective practices. And I think that just makes this an incredibly exciting time, and we're hoping that this summit assists in jump-starting that activity. So again, welcome, and we're very, very pleased to have you here. Over the next couple days, we've got some great things on tap. You'll have a chance to hear from national and state leaders. We're fortunate to have Dr. Terry O'Banion, national expert on higher education, on completion, success, and access. And so that'll be this morning. We'll have a great chance to hear from him. There's a wonderful panel tomorrow, a student-centered student panel built around some work that the RP group has done. I'm really looking forward to that one as well. And then just throughout the conference here, you'll have a chance to hear about some effective practices around K-12 linkages, orientation, assessment practices, and the innovative uses of technology to help support our students. So, I think that we've got a great program built out for you. And then finally, of course, you're going to get a lot of information, real nuts and bolts information about the Student Success and Support Program. You'll find out about funding allocations. You'll hear more about program requirements and rules, and you'll also hear about data reporting requirements. So we're really hoping that this conference provides you with some nuts and bolts information that will allow you to, at your local level, at your college, to go back and start putting these resources to use. And again, jump-starting this really exciting next chapter for the California community colleges. So welcome, and I'd like to just, but before I step away from the mic here, I would just like to express my appreciation to Vice Chancellor Linda Michalowski and her team and the planning committee that put together all the work to make this happen. And it's really exciting to see this kicking off, and I'm looking forward to sharing the next couple days with you. So again, welcome. Yeah.
I am just thrilled to look out in this room and see all of you here. Every single one of our 112 colleges is represented in this room. Not only that, we have representatives from 12 district offices and from many of our centers, the Compton Center, the Willow International Center that's about to become a college, several of our non-credit centers. The California community colleges are here to participate in this event, and this is really exciting to me. In addition, I know the answer to this, but I want to let you show how many of you are either instructional faculty or an instructional administrator. Raise your hand. I happen to know that 2/3 of the colleges are represented by both student services and instruction at this event. And that is very exciting and very necessary for the work that we have before us. I want to recognize a few special guests, and putting together this event has been an experience. I've never had to tell so many people no for so long, and then finally say, okay, we got more space. But it's a good thing I'm not into graft, because I could have sold tickets for this event, and it's only because the hotel had a cancellation that we were able to add more breakout space and let more of you come. But a few very special guests that I want to recognize. We have Joseph Belansky, from our Board of Governors, who also happens to be the articulation officer at Berkeley City College. We have, I think we have Keitha Mills, the President and CEO of the Foundation for California Community Colleges. No? If she's not here now, she will be here later today. We have Stephanie Dumont and Cynthia Rico representing the Executive Committee of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. We have Paul Steenhausen here somewhere from the Legislative Analyst's Office. There's Paul. We have a student here who will be working when the Student Success and Support Program Advisory Committee convenes. She will be the representative, Annalie Morano. Annalie, are you here? I can't see. She's coming. She has a long way to come from Crafton Hills College. And also, have you seen Mia? Okay. So we have a new member of our staff who's so new she hasn't even officially started yet. But Mia, are you here? Mia Keeley? Okay, back in the back. I want to say welcome to Mia because she will be in the Student Success and Support Programs unit, working specifically on admission and early assessment program. And we've had so many people leaving the Chancellor's office lately. I'm just thrilled that we're starting to rebuild. Mia was a high school counselor, and we're just so thrilled that she's going to be joining us. So take a minute to welcome her when you have that chance. And speaking of people leaving us, we have another special guest here today, Sonia Ortiz Mercado, who Sonia is now the Director of State and Federal Governmental Relations for Sacramento State University. But many of you worked with her as we framed the work that's coming to fruition now. And so I'm so happy that she could be here today to see the fruits of her labor. And then also from the Chancellor's office, several of my colleagues are here. Vice Chancellor Barry Russell, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, is here somewhere, back in that corner. And Vice Chancellor Vince Stewart, are you here? Our Vice Chancellor for Governmental Relations will be joining us. Barbara Olowski, our Basic Skills Coordinator, is here. And I can't name everyone. Sarah Tyson, you here? Sarah Tyson, Dean of Student Services. And LeBaron Woodyard, Dean in Academic Affairs, over here. Okay. And I can't name everyone or I'll bore you to death, but would all of the Chancellor's Office staff please stand? I see quite a few of them back in that corner. So virtually everyone in the Chancellor's office, and many who are not in the Chancellor's office, but CSSOs and matriculation, now student success coordinators, and others have been just instrumental in allowing us to do this. But the two people without whom this event would not have happened are sitting here at the head table. Jeff Spano, Dean of Student Services, and and Dr. Deborah Sheldon, who was the last one standing in the old matriculation unit. So going forward, we are going to continue to have to partner, work together, be creative in how we do things, because we have an enormous task ahead of us. Fortunately, as we took on our focus on student success, we have received tremendous support from the legislature, from the governor's administration. This was evidenced in a $50 million augmentation that Deputy Chancellor Skinner mentioned for the Student Success and Support Program, in addition to restoration of some of the categorical funds that were cut from EOPS, DSPS, and CalWORKs, recognizing the importance of those programs, too, to supporting and enabling success for our most disadvantaged students. In the course of this event, we will talk about the practical aspects of implementing this program. We will also give you an opportunity to hear from your colleagues. I mean, among the 112 community colleges in this state, you are at every conceivable stage of changing the way you approach student success across the institution. And so we invited you to tell us what you had to share with your colleagues, and we have a wide variety of interest sessions for you. We tried to provide streams of sessions that would be of interest to almost anyone. There are sessions focused on what goes on in the classroom. There are sessions focused on the nuts and bolts of administering the program. And there are sessions on how our colleges went about deciding how to work together and transform the institution to focus on student success. And so, and then we have the wonderful keynote speakers that Eric mentioned. So by the time, by the last event tomorrow will be an opportunity for you to gather in 6 breakouts that we're calling action planning sessions. We have CSSOs, members of the Chief Student Services Officers Executive Committee, and other volunteers who have been trained, thanks to Juliana Barnes from San Diego, who are ready to facilitate these discussions. And when you leave here, we don't want it to be an ending, we want it to be a beginning. And we want you to go back to your campuses feeling that you've gained knowledge and empowerment to make things happen. So that gets us off to a good start, I think. And so I would like to ask Juliana Barnes to come up, and she's going to introduce our keynote speaker.
When I was asked to introduce Terry O'Banion, I was really ecstatic because being a recent doctoral grad, I know I cited him several times, and I know many of you have, and you'll see why in a moment when I introduce him and share with you some of his work. Terry O'Banion has been a community college leader for over 50 years. It's hard to believe when you see him sitting here that it's been that long. In a survey of 11,000 higher education leaders in Change magazine, he was named one of 11 idea champions who set the agenda for all of higher education. And in fact, he was the only community college leader on the list. Terry O'Banion has authored 15 books and over 190 manuscripts including monographs, chapters, and articles on the community college. He has consulted in over 800 community colleges in every state in the nation and in Canada, Australia, Japan, and the United Arab Emirates. 5 national awards have been established in his name, including the Terry O'Banion Student Technology Award created by Microsoft and the O'Banion Prize for Teaching and Learning created by the Educational Testing Service. He has been a Dean of Students in 2 Florida community colleges. He has served as the Vice Chancellor for Education for the Dallas Community Colleges and Professor of Higher Education at the University of Illinois and at the University of California, Berkeley, and a Distinguished Visiting Professor for the University of Texas. He was president, and many of us know him through the League for Innovation. He was president for 23 years for the League for Innovation in the community colleges. And under his leadership, the League became an international organization of over 750 community colleges, recognized by Change Magazine as, quote, the most dynamic organization in the community college world. His 1997 book, A Learning College for the 21st Century, helped trigger the learning revolution in higher education. And his 2013 book on academic advising and his recent monograph on access, success, and completion have been cited as seminal documents on the completion agenda, which is the topic of the presentation today. So you see, to me, he really embodies the practitioner scholar, and I'm really excited and honored to invite you to the podium. Dr. Terry O'Banion.
Thanks, Julie. You forgot to tell him I was president of my 8th grade class. Twice. I'm delighted to be here today for this wonderful outpouring of interest in student success. I want to clarify one personal thing. A number of my friends came up and we had a good conversation, and where I live is a floating topic. Some people think I live in Texas, and some people think I live in Arizona, where the League for Innovation is now. Ich bin California. I have lived in California for 38 years. So I'm one of you. Thank you very much for that. That I live here. I live in Irvine, and I'm so pleased to be a part of this wonderful state and of the wonderful energy that coalesces around this work here today. We have been summoned to a summit, and you came. And every one of us in this room share a core common value. We are deeply and strongly committed to the success of our students. It's the one binding value that binds all of us together and will be the theme throughout this extraordinary conference that has been so well planned and designed to give you an opportunity to share in and celebrate your progress in moving towards student success. For my work, I want to frame my discussion around 2 key questions. The first question is, what is the completion agenda and why is it important? And I realize I sneaked 2 questions there. What is the completion agenda and why is it important, to sort of set the context, the broader national context for the work we're all engaged in? And the second question is, to get down to the really nitty-gritty, what really works to help students succeed? What really works? So let me visit with you briefly about the completion agenda and why it's important. This is the mission of the completion agenda in a nutshell. The idea is to double the number of students by the year 2020 who achieve a certificate, a 2-year degree, who transfer to the university. Now, it's the same thing as the student success agenda. It's not different. The student success agenda I think of as a much larger goal under which we can hang a lot of ideas and concepts. But the completion agenda is a variation of the student success agenda in that it is very targeted and very focused to double the numbers of students by the year 2020. It's the same thing, it's just a more focused goal, which gives us some goals to achieve and benchmarks to work toward. And nationally, most people refer to this as the completion agenda. Most of the policy people, most of the writers, most of the foundations. So I refer to it as the completion agenda, but I do recognize that it simply is nothing more than a more targeted version of the student success agenda. It has become, under the auspices of the completion agenda, the overarching mission of the community college because it is championed now by national leaders from the White House to individual community colleges across the country. President Obama set the goal a number of years ago for us when he said we need 5 million more community college graduates by 2020. And a number of colleges around the country have actually figured out how many students that means for them, and they use that goal internally to sort of check where they are on achieving the goal. The Lumina Foundation has had a similar goal, a little bit differently stated. They're looking for a 60% increase of completers by 2025. You're familiar with Lumina. They're the ones who fund the Achieving the Dream project. The Gates Foundation is a real driving force behind the completion agenda. They like the idea of doubling the numbers of grads. And several years ago, the 6 national community college organizations, AACC, the League for Innovation, et cetera, signed on to a document agreeing that we need 50% more graduates by 2020. And here's one example from one state. Utah says we need 66%. They're really ambitious by 2020. And here's an example of one college, Anne Arundel in Michigan, says they have the double by 2020 is their theme. What I've done in this slide is to show you the tremendous commitment to this one focused goal, from the White House to major foundations, to major community college organizations, to states. There are now 39 states have signed on to this, and Wyoming signed on recently, so 40 states have signed on to the completion agenda, and hundreds of individual community colleges, including, I think, the 112 and growing list of community colleges in the state of California. It's a very important agenda. Never in the history of the community college movement, 110 years old, never in our history have so many stakeholders signed on to such a focused and prescribed agenda. That has never happened in the history of our movement. We have never had that kind of unified approach, and it's important. It's an important agenda for us, and one that will determine our success over the next 2 or 3 decades. It's important because our failures as an educational system have contributed to what is looming as a national disaster. We used to be first in the world in the percentage of young adults with college degrees, and now in a few short years, we have dropped to number 16. In the value, in the impact of educational systems around the world, we are now number 26th. 26, way behind other countries. The completion agenda is also important because the American dream is becoming a nightmare. A strong statement out of AACC's National Commission on the 21st Century, the future of community colleges in the 21st century. The American dream is becoming a nightmare. For the first time in our history, the current generation of college-age Americans will be less educated than their parents' generation. Most of us grew up with the idea that if we worked hard, we got our education, we kept our noses clean, we would be more successful than our parents. And that was true for some of you. It was certainly true for my generation. It is not true for my 12 grandchildren. The American dream has changed dramatically in our lifetime, in which we can easily categorize most people from the 99% to the 1%, and there aren't many 1%ers in this room. The American dream has become a nightmare because of the socioeconomic conditions in this country, and the completion agenda is part of the solution. The completion agenda is important for another reason. It's important because that now that we as community colleges are in the public eye, we cannot continue to perform as we have in the past. We're talking about transforming institutions, not just diddling around the edges with a little innovation here or a little technology prosthetic on the side of a college. We're talking about major transformation of these institutions. We've put ourselves on the line front and center, and our record is not very good when we start looking at it. Nationally, 14% of community college students do not complete a single credit in the first term. They pay money, but 14% nationally do not complete a single credit. Almost 50% drop out by the second year. It's intolerable in a country with our needs. 60% of our students need remediation, and it's worse in many places. In our own state, 72% of our students are placed into remedial English, and 83% of our students are placed in remedial math, according to your own Student Success Task Force report. I was at a college recently in the Midwest in which 90% of the students did not qualify for college ready. 90%. Only 10% were ready for college. Part of the real problem is that 33% of the students recommended for developmental studies never enroll in those courses. So it isn't just that they are not ready, we're not ready. Our systems aren't working to help students get the help they need. So this is a terribly important agenda that many foundations have rallied around. In fact, the Gates Foundation is probably the leading example. The Gates Foundation, the largest foundation in the history of the world, with $80 billion in which Bill and Melinda Gates want to spend in their lifetime, have already contributed $500 million to community colleges alone to help with them with this issue. They are funding by the millions 3 states in a completion by design project. Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio are leading states designing student success pathways to completion with millions and millions of dollars from the Gates Foundation. The Lumina Foundation has plucked down $100 million already for achieving the dream. And there are over 25 national initiatives. Your statewide initiative for student success is one grand and great design. But they're everywhere. I'm speaking at this same conference in Michigan, Arkansas, and Wyoming coming up. Student success summits all over the country because there's an emerging, rising tide of interest in student success all over the country. Much of it funded by foundations. Never in our history have so many foundations supported our efforts to improve and expand student learning that leads to successful completion for our students. In California, is obviously, as it always is, one of the leading states in that major initiative. California has some challenges. Here are a couple of those challenges out of your task force group. Less than 30% of students in California are college ready. That means that 70% of the students who come to California community colleges will require some kind of remedial developmental education. Only 53.6% of degree-seeking students ever achieve that goal. They never achieve the degree. And of students who plan to transfer, only 41% are successful. These are data that are now public. The completion agenda is important because we cannot win and we cannot serve our communities, our families, and our students on this record. So you have decided as a state to embrace these challenges and to create the Student Success Agenda, and here's the statement from your Student Success Task Force. These recommendations present an opportunity for transformative change, not just messing around the edges, transformative change that will refocus our systems, efforts, and resources to enable a greater number of our students to succeed. Your overall goal. And you have some key guidelines for that. These are your key recommendations that all just reflect what's happening nationally in terms of what you want to do to make a difference in the lives of your students. At this summit, you will be sharing the progress you're making to address some of these recommendations, and your statewide scorecard system helps you benchmark what you're doing with your colleagues across the state. So we have a pretty good idea of what the challenges are and why it's important. We have a pretty good idea of where we want to go, what the needs are. We are still trying to find out what really works to help students succeed. What really works to help students succeed? Let's cut to the chase on that. The tendency of most colleges and state initiatives nationwide, the tendency has been for the past 10 years in which we have been engaged in this, every national group is to search for the magic practices. What are the practices that we could bring to our college, establish, experiment with, and then scale up that would help us with the Student Success Agenda? And so we have invented in the literature two kinds of practices. High impact practices are practices that have research backing them up. And promising practices are the practices that we intuitively believe in as educators that we don't want to give up, but we may not have research to support it. So most colleges, most national initiatives have designed all of their strategies around these set of magic practices. It's if you could just do if we could just get learning communities in all of our colleges and their centers, we would succeed. If we could just get our faculty to adopt project-based learning practices, if we could get everyone enrolled in a student success course. These are the practices that most colleges talk about when you ask, what are you doing to help your students succeed? What are you doing for transformative change in your institutions? That's the usual approach. I don't know if it's your approach or not, but it's the approach that I see most often around the country. And I've spoken to 20 colleges in the past 8 weeks. And this is what they give me. What are you doing? I always ask ahead of time. Give me your student success plans. Let me have your board agendas. Let me see what you're doing. And this is what I get. This is the kind of stuff we're doing. I was a college in the Midwest who sent me a list of 95 practices. I'm serious. They said, this is what we're doing. Isn't it wonderful? And I said, does anyone understand how all this works? The answer was no. I said, do you have any evidence that it works? And they said, yes, of course. So a week later, they sent me a list of the same 95 practices with the numbers of students who were engaged in each of those practices. So we had, 107 students enrolled in student success courses. That was their evidence that it worked. It was just the enrollment data. They didn't even understand really the issue of how those practices have impact. They just thought if they did lots of things, and that's the history of the community colleges. If we just turn loose this great innovative spirit, We just get faculty to innovate. If we reward faculty for innovation, and in the league, I'm part of that. I invented the Innovator of the Year award at the league for many years. And we still award people for the innovations they do. But we changed the tactics some time ago. We now ask for evidence that those innovations have made a difference in the lives of students. A little bit different, but we just encourage innovations. We thought if we had these colleges where everyone was innovating all over the place, that would solve our problems. Let me make a key point. While it's helpful to experiment with these practices, and we will continue to do so, such practices by themselves are not particularly effective in achieving the goals of the completion agenda. By themselves, they don't work. And I'm going to give you two quotes from two major research organizations that say that. The first is the people who do the Gates Foundation research for their 3 states completion by design. And those researchers have said, while colleges will likely need to adopt some new practices and adapt some old ones, practice-based reforms cannot be the primary work undertaken by colleges participating in the completion by design in our 3 states. It isn't just the practices. And here's the senior researcher from the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, Davis Jenkins. He says, adopting discrete best practices and trying to bring them to scale will not work to improve student completion on a substantial scale, even if you have 95 of them. Piecemeal reform is not transformation. Boutique programs designed for 82 students is not transformative. Even the application of an innovation by an individual faculty member, all of these are impotent to bring about significant change in an institution. The problem with looking at the high impact practices as the solution to student success is that we don't do it in a collaborative, planned way. We might have a small group of faculty, maybe 17 faculty here, who champion learning communities. And so they're deeply engaged in it. They believe in learning communities. They're trying to convince you they should have learning communities everywhere. Another group of faculty over here believes in dual enrollment with the high schools, and they approach it with a passion and a dynamism to get more high schools involved in that. Then here's a group that wants supplemental instruction and do away with remedial and developmental education and just provide supplemental education. And so we create these islands of innovation in which you have certain faculty members championing one of the practices. But no one sort of brings all this together. No one brings together, as you have here maybe for one of the first times in a long time, the student personnel side of the house and the academic side of the house. Because they live in artificial silos that were created historically. And as long as they live in those silos, you're never going to get together and collaborate on the practices, because the student personnel people will have their own little club. They want student success courses. So somehow, by approaching this from the viewpoint of sort of championing one of the high-impact practices, we create silos and clusters of islands of innovation. And what we need is a comprehensive, collaborative design in an institution if we want transformative change. Transformative change. What we need, and the practices aren't going away. That's the bread and butter of the daily work. So the practices are there. We're going to do those, but what we need is another layer, maybe a foundation layer for the practices in which we can agree on the basic principles and guidelines around which we can all collaborate that supports the practices. And let me share with you 6 guidelines for student success that can attract everyone in the room, including your classified staff and your administrators and your adjunct faculty. Everyone who can join in and support a basic guideline for student success provides a better foundation for transformative change than to simply divide up the college into a series of practices assigned to a particular group in the college. Here's an example. Guideline number 1. Every student will make a significant connection with another person at the college as soon as possible. Intuitively, you understand what that means. You know the importance of that. You know deeply the importance of that for first-time, first-generation college students who do not know college language, who do not know how to navigate the institution. SSSP has surveyed over 500,000 community college students, and when they asked those students, what is the most important factor in your staying in college, the students answered semester after semester after semester, a counselor, an advisor, a secretary, another student knows my name. God, how heartbreaking that is. Students are telling me the most important factor in staying in college? That someone knows my name? That's not rocket science, how to address that. If that were a guideline that you adopted in your college, and then you encouraged and invited or required every person to rally around that and try to support that guideline, you might see some interesting changes in your institution. When a security guard in the parking lot says to a student, you know, you're parked in the wrong place, let me help you find the right place to park. By the way, my name is Jim. A personal connection begins to be made. When a student walks into the admissions office and there's a kiosk and there's a secretary sitting there, and the secretary says, we're so glad you're here. What can I help you with? What is your name, by the way? Some personal connection gets to be made. When faculty members stand at the door and greet each student as they enter, when they begin to call them by their names in classes, those kinds of personal connections are beginning to be made. Now, they're not enough, but you need to keep the students there long enough to be able to really connect with them at the core of education, where you begin to help them understand concepts and ideas and prejudices and values and the beauty of your discipline. And it won't happen if they don't stay around. So making that first human connection is deeply important in a community college so that you can keep them long enough there to connect them with the wonderful, wonderful ideas that you have prepared for them. These kinds of guidelines begin to impact and infiltrate the entire culture of the campus. Do you see how this is different than working on a single high-impact practice? It's a little bit different twist. We need both. Here's another one. Guideline 2, key intake programs including orientation, assessment, advisement, and placement will be integrated and mandatory. 2 key issues, integrated. When a student comes in who has never been on your campus before, who has never been on a college campus before, the services, those very important intake services of admissions, assessment, placement, orientation, financial aid, registration, they're organized in such an integrated way, the student gets everything one needs. If a student walks into the admissions office, fills out the form, and says, but I also need financial aid, and the clerk says financial aid is over in building X, that student may never make it to building X. They need those in one place. Our students, particularly the first-time, first-generation college students do not understand these common practices that's so common to us because all of us have totally immersed ourselves in college language and college culture. Ask your students, give them a list and ask them to define placement, assessment, orientation, registration, and see what you get. And if you have a sign that says registration here, what if it says bursar's office? As it does in some places. The language of college, we need to be careful about the language of college, and these key intake programs are the important steps that occur before these steps are the second most important functions in the institution because they occur every semester for all students before the most important function takes place, and that is classroom instruction. It starts in the classroom, but to be prepared for the classroom, student service people have to work carefully with faculty to make sure these functions are working to help them get ready for a positive classroom experience. And I don't know why, since these intake functions are so important, we haven't made them mandatory, but historically we have not. We're beginning to see colleges make orientation mandatory or assessment mandatory. Remember Kay McClinney's warning, students do not do optional. And we still provide many of these services as if they were optional. There are beginning to be all kinds of breakthroughs in doing these better. Academic advising is the key to student success. We're beginning to understand with some sort of technological support how better to do that. We're doing a better job of orientation and assessment. If we don't assess students well, we can't get them in the right courses. We're beginning to have some real breakthroughs on the assessment of students for course placement. Most colleges nationally use Compass and AccuPlacer, which were not designed for this purpose, but we have known all along that we need additional kinds of assessment. We need to assess the non-cognitive factors. We know that. We know that as educators. It's those other factors that play as important a role in success as does academic knowledge. We need to try to figure out how to assess motivation, drive, and grit. Not grits. How do you assess grit? There's something in a student who is going to succeed against all the odds. That's a personal kind of drive and motivation. We need to figure out how to assess that. Even your task force recommends that this is important. You say colleges are required to also consider other measures of a student's ability to succeed, such as academic history and demonstrated motivation in assessment of the non-cognitive factors. Laura Hope and her colleagues at Chaffey College are doing some of the best work in the country in this area. I believe they're going to be one of the leading forces in helping us learn better how to do this. They have been working with the Gallup Corporation, and they have created the Hope Scale. They didn't name that for Laura, but they could have. They have created the Hope Scale, in which Chaffey is already assessing thousands of students, along with a mindset scale that they have taken the leadership on locally. And they're getting a good handle, and they have some beginning evidence that by adding those assessment scores to the other assessment scores on basic knowledge, they can better place students in courses. There's been another breakthrough recently from the Educational Testing Service, the largest testing company in the world, with tremendous resources for research. They have been researching this for a number of years, and they have come out with a new design just for community college students called the Success Navigator. It's a $10 test that takes 30 minutes online. It's based upon very, very sound research, and already was released last month. Already 70 colleges around the country have signed up for this, including Santa Monica, the Los Angeles Community College District, and in California, California State at Northridge. You're going to see this proliferate as one of the best models in the country because it's backed up by some of the best research in the country. And they look at drive, self-efficacy, and motivation. If you're interested in that, I have a stack of pamphlets on it. Be glad to share that with you after the end of this session. The third guideline for student success is that every student will be placed in a program of study from day one. And a second part, undecided students will be placed in a mandatory program of study designed to help them decide. A program of study is a set of courses with a prescribed pathway to completion. STEM is a pathway to completion, is a program of study. Business, nursing, it's a major. And in a study of 430,000 students, community college students, those who entered a program of study in the first year were twice as likely to complete as those who entered a program of study in the second year. The earlier a student makes a commitment to a program of study, a defined series of courses with a clear pathway, it doubles their chance for completing degrees or transfer. We need to get students in programs of study. But what if they don't know what they want to be? What if they're undecided? What if they're unsure? Let's create a program of study for undecided students. You could do that. If we had time right now, I did this with the faculty a couple of weeks ago in Tennessee, we could come up with 5 or 6 beautifully designed programs of study for undecided students, because you're exactly the people who knows what that is. I would come up with one something like maybe a learning community of 9 hours credit that might include a student success course, maybe a basic writing course, maybe a psychology course. I might take one of those courses out and put in a career exploration course that was part of my the experiences that the community service experience that you provide, so that they get a chance to engage and confront and look at a variety of careers, because the idea is to begin to make decisions about life goals, vocational goals, and program choice. But if you just let them wander around in the curriculum, you have done them no good service. You have delayed their success. You have contributed to their failures. If you can help them make good decisions, and they know this is the course of study, the program of study they want, get them enrolled in that program of study the very first term. If they don't know what they want to do, enroll them in a program of study anyway. A program of study designed to help them decide. Let's look at guideline 4. Every student who enrolls to pursue a certificate, degree, or who plans to transfer will work with college personnel to create a student success pathway, a roadmap to completion. Now, this guideline is different from a program of study. The program of study is the major, and the courses they take for that is a key part of the roadmap. But the pathway is the entire sequence that students experience from the first contact with the college all the way down to throwing their graduation hat into the air. This is the larger sequence, a long pathway that you use to guide the institution, the students' navigation through the college experience. In high schools, we call them individual education plans. And if we were a more systemic operation in schools, those students would bring those individual education plans from the 8th grade forward, and we would pick them up as they enter the college and continue them all the way through graduate school. We're not that systemic yet. We don't work together as a national educational system. We have articulation agreements between community colleges and universities for specific areas, but we don't have a systemic program of taking the student's life plan all the way through the system. You need roadmaps with goals, milestones, support, e-portfolios, and they get embedded in technology and can be used by parents, by students, by counselors, by faculty, by employers, people who need them. We need roadmaps and pathway designs. I think this is one of the most important parts of the student success agenda, and I write about it in other places. I know you're familiar with the idea of the roadmap design, but that's an entire speech in itself. Here's just a quick look at what it entails. This is the Gates Foundation Student Success Pathway. They had 4 big components where students move from connection to completion, and all of the 3 states that are doing this work through this roadmap design. I worked for the Gates Foundation for 2 years as a consultant in their work. Actually, I had one other interesting assignment was the Gates Foundation is a very interesting foundation. They haven't yet created a foundation culture, but they're doing so. And their first effort was to hire all of these liberal arts graduates, young, very bright, very capable, energetic, dynamic young people from the liberal arts colleges, and there are just hundreds of those at Gates. And they don't know anything about community colleges. They graduated from private liberal arts colleges in the Northeast, mostly. So Gates brought me in to teach them a course on the community college, which I just loved because that was my field at the universities where I've worked, to teach the basic course on the community college. So I taught the Gates Foundation staff, some 100 of them, the basic course on the community college, which I hope means that they're going to stick with community colleges for a while. With that amount of money there, we need to hang on to the Gates Foundation for a long time. This is one model, and I got very interested working for them in the models of the roadmap because they use this language in all of their work at Gates. My colleagues and I at the League for Innovation created a different model. We like the sort of the pathway components. You take all those components, the things that students do when they connect and then move all the way through completion, and we like giving it a little bit more human color here with feet moving in these directions. But you need some kind of design, and if you believe in the student success pathway model, it provides an excellent framework for your efforts. In fact, the American Association of Colleges and Universities is working on a major project funded by the MetLife Foundation called the Roadmap Project Pathways. And here's an example of a number of colleges around the country. They call them different things: Road to Success, the GPS, which is kind of clever, Guide to Personal Success, Roadway to Completion. Mount San Antonio here has one called Digital Roadmap. Valencia Colleges is quite well known. They call it Life Map, and every student has a life map at the college that takes them all the way through. It's key to their entire academic advising process, and they have a chapter in my book on their life map on the academic advising. Anyway, I want to recommend the student success pathway model, roadmap model to you because it's the kind of thing that every student should have for himself or herself, but it's also a framework for the college's strategic plan. What the college should be doing in terms of this whole student success model is what you want each individual student to do. So what colleges do is what students do, and what students do is what colleges do. If we thought that way, our strategic plans would reflect the roadmaps that we design for our students. There's a lot of idea and conceptual design behind that notion. If you're interested in that, start taking a look at the papers that are out on student success pathways. The fifth, and I have only 6, guideline for student success. Every student will be carefully monitored throughout the first term to ensure successful progress, and the college will make interventions immediately to keep students on track. We know that early alert and active intervention systems can increase retention of first-time students by as much as 20%. If you could increase retention by 20%, wouldn't you grab on to that one? Early alert. Early means early. The midterm grade in a 16-week semester is way too late. The midterm exam of feedback, that's way too late. You've already lost most of them. We talk about the first year experience. We need to talk about the first week experience. For our students, it's the first week that makes the difference. Rio Salado College in the Maricopa District in Phoenix provides a class roll for every faculty member at the beginning of the term, and the class roll has on it a green dot, an orange dot, or a red dot. The green dot says this, by each student's name. The green dot says this is a pretty good student. They've been doing well, they've been quite successful, may not require a whole lot of your personal time. The orange dot says you need to be aware that this student might have some special needs, and the red dot says this student's going to need your attention. This student will need your attention. And so they have a system that in the very first week, if there are signs that students are not progressing, and it's hard to do that in the first week, but if you get indicators, and they've at least identified 3, if you get indications that the student's not attending, if the student's not turning in assignments, if the student is not participating in classroom discussions, they can send a message to a coach who then contacts that student to help intervene, to help get that student on track in those courses. Early, alert, and active intervention. There are many, many systems out there like that. All of us are going to be using those systems, and they're going to get better and better. I think it's going to be one of the great breakthroughs, technological breakthroughs for us in the next 5 years. We can do that because of data analytics. It's a new technology that mines huge amounts of data and helps us forecast the behavior of students and helps us then take a look at the students with similar characteristics so we can forecast what their behavior is possibly likely to be. Data analytics, you know what that is. You experience it every time you go to Amazon.com. You go to Amazon.com and a message comes up and it says, "Hello, Henry, we're glad you're back. The last time you were here, you bought 5 copies of 50 Shades of Grey." And people who bought those books also are buying these books, which you may want to purchase. The autobiography of the Marquis de Sade, Raising Your Teenage Daughter for Success by Linda Lovelace, and on and on. So you know what data analytics, how it works. We can do that with our students about all kinds of things. And so through early alert systems, we can then, the faculty member or specialized coaches in the institution can intervene to help get them on track. Final guideline is a kind of obvious one, but I want to twist it a little bit. Students will engage in courses and experiences designed to broaden and deepen their learning. Well, duh. Isn't that what we do with everything in education? We do. But I'm concerned about the completion agenda. The completion agenda itself has been sort of shanghaied by legislative and political interest who too easily turn our efforts at student success into only one version of a college education and student success, and that is, so much of our language in the completion agenda is about improving workforce training. Even President Obama, in his last inaugurational speech, said, "We need schools and colleges to train our workers." He could have said, "Prepare our citizens." He could have said many things. But he chose the language, "train our workers," probably without much thought, because the culture around the completion agenda has become all about training workers. Even the Gates Foundation, when they first put out their mission of the completion agenda, they said, we want to double the number of people who can get certificates, degrees with marketplace value. Their early language is that. I took umbrage at that. I wrote an article, completion to what end. I didn't have that much influence on Gates, but they eventually got rid of that language to look at a more broader purpose of education. And that's what I'm saying here in this. We need to keep this in perspective because we have a tendency in community colleges to run for the green light, which is vocational occupational education. It's the best thing we do. It's amazing. We are the purveyors of workforce training in this nation. We are the backbone of this country in terms of turning out. And California has had wonderful success with this. The numbers of first responders, the numbers of nurses, the numbers of people in the justice system, criminal justice system produced by you produce 80, 90% of those workers. But we need to do more, and we can. We must have citizens who are broadly educated if our democracy is to work. It is not a case of either or. It is not a case of either liberal or general education and workforce training. It has to be both. We have to have both, and faculty members have to come to the table and figure out what that looks like. We can't just give in to the notion that we are training workers for the future of this country so that we become internationally competitive once again. Our employers don't ask for that. We sometimes say they do, but the American Association of Colleges and Universities did a survey of 318 CEOs this January, and 74% of them agreed with the statement, to achieve professional and career success in today's global economy, I would advise a young person to pursue a liberal education. Employers don't want people who are just trained. They want people who think. They want people who have those broad skills, and I think there's a bridge. I think there's a clear bridge between the liberal arts and workforce training. If we could figure out a way to help all of our students get the skills of problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration and teamwork, that comes from both sides of the aisle, and we could figure out how to do that. Instead of just having a general education, long list of courses in which students make choices, and from one column, you got 37 choices to meet the humanities requirement, so choose any of these 37 courses. And here's the workforce training, which is clearly designed. The two sides of our houses have become dysfunctional, need to get together. I don't know why we haven't created a core curriculum requiring 9 credit hours, problem solving 101, critical thinking 101, and collaboration and teamwork 101. Get the two sides of the house together and figure out how to teach that, drawing from the disciplines, drawing from the employers and workforce training. Our students deserve better. Our students deserve both bread and roses. And that's up to us. You have to come together in your colleges to make that happen. You do not want your own son or daughter just to have the technical workforce skills. You want them to be broadly educated in the general and liberal arts. And we have never solved that problem very well in the community college. That's why I think it's deserving of its own guideline, its own principle to help guide our efforts in the institution. Well, these are 6 guidelines for student success. They're just ones I cobbled together out of other people's work and my own experience and intuition and instinct. What would happen at your institution if you came together as the student success team and agreed on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guidelines that would provide a foundation across the institution, guidelines that more people in the institution could join and collaborate around as general guidelines to help you make those individual high-impact practices really work. I think that's the goal of an emerging idea across the country regarding the completion agenda. Our core mission doesn't really change. In the final analysis, our work is about improving and expanding student learning through quality services and quality teaching. Our goal is to improve and expand student learning. And if we figure out how to do that, then the completion is a valuable byproduct of that work. The work isn't necessarily completion. We shouldn't assume that those goals of doubling the number is how we want to measure ourselves, though we need to do that because it's part of the national scheme. In the final analysis, our work is about improving and expanding student learning. But the community college has made a major investment in the completion agenda. It is the overarching mission of the community college, supported by foundations and stakeholders from the White House to the State House to hundreds and hundreds of community colleges across the country. It is our Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame on the national stage. And the stakes for us in terms of how we address the completion agenda and how we achieve those goals, the stakes are extraordinarily high. If we do not succeed in this effort, the community college we know today may cease to exist. And the community college we dream of for the future may never come to be. Thanks very much. Let me say one more thing about this. Thanks, Linda. Thank you.
We have about 15 minutes, Terry, if you're willing to take a few questions. And please use the microphones. There are two in the audience because all of this is being webcast. So please use the microphones.
Thanks, Linda. We have time for a few questions, and while people may be thinking about that, I want to thank my colleagues here. This monograph, Access, Success, and Completion, is published by the League for Innovation. I get no royalties for this. I give all of my royalties to the League and the AACC. But I always ask colleagues to help me, and I had 24 colleagues vet this document in terms of their experience. And I want to thank my California colleagues who participated in this, a number of folks who gave me great help. Juliana Barnes from Cuyamaca, Don Burrs from everywhere, Sunita Cook from Grossmont, Laura Hope from Chaffee, Greg Peterson from Long Beach, and Michelle Pilati from Rio Honda College. Thank you so much for helping me with this document. Question here?
First of all, thank you very much, Mr. O'Banion, for the talk. I was just sharing with my neighbor that it's remarkable that you tailored this speech for us. I assume you only do that for your home state of California. You talk about the completion agenda, and we're all familiar with that, and then you talked about the foundations with their wealth to share. I was wondering if you'd be comfortable sharing your perspective on the agendas of these foundations, the recent Washington Monthly article that called out colleges that were failing or succeeding by their standards, and Kay's reaction to that article, and even perhaps you could comment on the agenda of the Lumina Foundation and the others who think they know what's best for all of us.
Yeah. That's an intriguing question. Kay's response was about them using SSSP data to put colleges in categories, which she has always never favored and took umbrage. That was part of her response there. I don't think that was an indication that she doesn't that she takes questions of foundations. She's funded by foundations. So probably she has some good things to say. I think that we would not be where we are without the foundation support. Certainly in a time when our declining resources are such that we can't do this job by ourselves. We just can't. So number one, I'm thankful for the support. I'm thankful for the largesse of the support. We've never had that kind of funding. We never got funding from any foundations. We used to be, I've been in the work for 52 years. I used to knock on foundations' doors and they said, we have a policy that purposely excludes community colleges, from funding. So we all have been pretty pleased about that. Foundations can't have a dog in the race by public policy. But they do. They have priorities, as they should. And I think that the foundations who come to the table on this do support our overall generic ideas of student success. Now, foundations like Lumina and Gates have sort of changed the scorecard. It used to be that any of us could apply to a foundation with a special idea and get funded by it. But they have decided, and this is a new culture of foundations, that they will set some priorities and even create their own internal staffs to go and support and drive the projects themselves. And that's what's happening in completion by design, and it's what's happening in achieving the dream. But I think the goals of those initiatives are sound and probably represent what we want to do anyway. Obviously, colleges wouldn't be doing that if they didn't like that. I don't think Central Piedmont Community College in North Carolina is just doing all that work because they get $85,000 a year from Gates. I think they're doing it because they do represent what the colleges already want to do. But it's important to keep an eye on that, just to make sure that we still have a say. The culture's changed. Most colleges can't just go to the Gates Foundation for money. They don't fund it that way. They were funded on their priorities. But in part, it was because they were beginning to see that just funding all of these various projects without any design is like saying to faculty, just go and innovate what you want to do. There's no collaboration, there's no organization, there's no systemic organization to it. So that was what I think drives the foundations. They want to have more impact. Whether it's negative, I don't know what the negative impact that is. A whole philanthropy group, that organization that will, I'm sure, continue to study that. A question here?
Yes, I just wanted to find out what your viewpoint is. If you see colleges having any responsibility for the remediation of students at our community college level, if there should be any resources provided for this remediation, or if we are having a different vision of a community college not including remediation. That was never a question we asked 15 years ago. It was just simply part of our established mission. But Connecticut recently is taking remediation out of their community colleges. In part, I think remediation is so difficult. What is California? 70% of your students are in remediation. That's tough. If you stopped doing remediation, what's going to happen to those students? We would just invent some other kind of institution. We have that institution already designed. It's called prison. That would take a lot of those folks. And I think as a society, we can probably afford to continue to have remediation, and I would certainly keep it in the community college, I think, where it belongs. We might get better at it if the Common Core idea in the high schools, if the high schools get better at educating students, we would have fewer remedial students, but they're still going to be, for our generations, they're going to be adults who won't get the new high school education. They're going to keep coming to us. So remediation, I think, is here with us to stay. My own personal opinion is that this is where it belongs. And I think we are beginning to figure out in the last 10 years or so, much of it coming from research out of the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, funded by the Gates Foundation and others, to help us understand better how to do developmental education. So I would keep it where it is because I don't think there's a good alternative. Yes.
Hello. Given the size of our system and the number of students that we are struggling to meet the demand for, I'm curious as to what evidence you have found in other states in the nation that might suggest that who delivers that roadmap with the student might make a difference in their completion rate? Does who the student come in contact with make a difference in
Tease that out for me a minute. By raising that question, do you have someone in mind?
Yeah, I was really careful in how I framed this question.
I know. But is this the issue of California in terms of the role of counselors in part? Would you, if you could make...
My colleagues are telling me to say yes.
Well, here's the question. If you could have the best resources to help students create their student success pathways, whom would you call on? Well, to divide this issue between faculty and counselors is a total red herring, and it's a worthless idea to pursue. You're just going to wear your brains out doing that and beat up on each other to ad nauseum. Maybe that's what you're doing, so I'm going to tell you, quit doing that. Stop it. Stop it. To help students make such important decisions about life map, their roadmap to the future, requires the resources of everyone in the institution. Get over it. It's the faculty in specialized areas, it's counselors, it's special advisors, it's volunteers from the community, it's the classified staff, it is trained students themselves. You've got to have a better model. It's not who, it's what. And until you know what you're doing, you can't answer the question who should do it. And I have heard rumors from some of my friends that California has this odd situation in which counselors in the ratio of 1 to 1,800 students are still seeing students 30 minutes each, face-to-face, trying to help them make decisions about what courses to register for next term. It's a horrible use of resources. No one who makes $85,000 a year should be helping a student decide what time to take a course. Apparently my friends are accurate in their observations. I didn't realize I was touching this third rail. You need to look at your academic advising model. You need to have a model that helps move students through establishing educational goals, vocational goals, program choice, course choice, and then registering for those courses. Then you can look at the skills required for each of those steps, and they are outlined in my new book on academic advising, monograph from AACC, with 5 examples from 5 colleges around the country. I designed a model of academic advising 40 years ago. This is its 40th anniversary. Google it. It's called the O'Banion Model of Academic Advising. We did academic advising. We didn't know how to do it. Our argument was who should do it. We realized that was the wrong question. It's what is academic advising, and then who should do it. And hundreds of colleges have adopted that model. It must not have gotten across the Rockies this far. Take a look at it. It helps solve that issue. A final question here.
Paul Toll recently created a book called How Children Succeed. And in that book, he talked about non-academic factors that influence student success. And one of the things you talked about earlier was grit. Could you expand a little bit more on that as it applies to community college students?
Would you rather have a student in College Ready English 101 who scores high on Accuplacer, but who does not have much motivation, who does not have much a good self-concept, who does not have much drive, who lacks grit? Or would you rather have a student in your class who scores average on Accuplacer, but has a great deal of drive, who has shown already with other, from their high school experience and from other experiences in life, that they have this internal drive to succeed? Which student would you rather have? Our answer is both. But that student who has that drive and grit and motivation is a very special student, and we need to figure out ways to examine that better so that we can factor that in, not only to helping students get placed in the right courses, but helping students overcome all kinds of barriers and problems, because the real problem for our students are socioeconomic, and we are pretty impotent to do much about that as an institution. But we can take those students who have that natural built-in drive and motivation, and I don't know if that's anything that can be learned. I think it can be enhanced. And I think as facilitators of human growth and development, once we find students with that, or once we find out ways to assess that so that it becomes more visible, we can certainly celebrate that drive and grit and provide opportunities for its further enhancement and development to the good of us all. Thank you for a great Student Success Summit and in having me participate with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Terry. I have a feeling your past of hiding out in Irvine is over. The gig is up. We have a lot of work going on here, and you have a lot to contribute. So we'll be in touch.